Turning to our top story this half hour, growing calls in Congress for a new probe of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. Republicans on the House Judiciary Committee are now asking the Justice Department to appoint a special counsel to investigate actions taken by Clinton, former FBI Director James Comey, and former Attorney General Loretta Lynch. This after the same committee agreed to seek documents related to Comey's investigation of Clinton's private email server. Joining us now is Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Anna Napolitano on the odds that the Justice Department appoints another special counsel.
Well, remember, the reason for the appointment of the special counsel, the stated reason, was that Jeff Sessions is a potential witness into the investigation of any relationship, if it ever existed, between the Trump campaign and the Russians, because then Senator Sessions had a management role in the campaign. So the appointment of a special counsel needs to be triggered by the inability of the Attorney General or the Deputy Attorney General to run the investigation. I don't think such a conflict would exist if Mrs. Clinton were going to be investigated. Now, there's several arguments about investigating Hillary. One is, Mr. President, you fired Jim Comey because he dropped the ball on Hillary. So why don't you take that evidence and present it to a grand jury and see whether or not the grand jury indicts her, because the evidence of her guilt is overwhelming. The Lindsey Graham, Senator Graham argument against that is we're not a banana republic and we don't go after our political opponents just for vengeance purposes. We should let this thing rest. My own view is the evidence of her guilt is overwhelming. Jim Comey was wrong to usurp the role of the Attorney General and announce publicly she's not going to be investigated. President Trump could change that with a phone call to Jeff Sessions. The other request being made about Mrs. Clinton is that there appears to be some evidence of interaction between her campaign and foreign entities to make then-candidate Trump look bad. Remember, receiving, quote, anything of value, closed quote, from a foreign national or a foreign government when you're running a campaign is a felony. These are the allegations against Donald Trump Jr. Now the same allegations are being made against John Podesta, not personally, but people that worked for him in the Clinton camp. So that's the complicated mess that we're confronting this morning. Republicans want Mrs. Clinton investigated because of campaign collusion and because of the email scandal. They want that to be reopened.
In President Trump's tweets about Jeff Sessions and what he sees as Jeff Sessions' faults or failings in his job, does it complicate matters because President Trump is talking about Hillary Clinton, because that does see to some it smacks of he's urging his Attorney General to go after a political opponent.
But listen, if there's evidence of criminality there, and I understand the question, of course, and there is evidence of criminality in the email scandal. We know that. There was a mountain of evidence of her guilt, which Jim Comey dismissed. I don't know if there's any evidence of collusion between Mrs. Clinton's campaign and a foreign national or a foreign government. But the most effective way for the president to address this would be to call the Attorney General. Can the president call the Attorney General and say, I want Mrs. Clinton investigated? Of course he can. He's the chief law enforcement officer of the land. A grand jury can reject it, saying this is political. A federal judge could reject it, saying this is political. But the Attorney General cannot if the president gives him an instruction to look at something.
The President and the Attorney General work together in this environment, given all the tension that we've seen in just the last couple of weeks.
You know, I'm familiar with that argument. And I will take you back to the early 60s. One of the greatest attorney generals we ever had was the president's brother, who had managed this campaign. So you really can't say that because the president and the attorney general work together, because they're friends, because they talk to each other, they can't discuss law enforcement.
He meant the
Trump is after him all the time.
I don't understand that, except I do understand the president's personality. He's obviously trying to send a message to Jeff Sessions personally instead of sending it privately. So he has his means for doing that. But if the question is, can he call Jeff Sessions up and say, investigate Hillary or send the stuff about Hillary to a grand jury? The answer to those questions is yes.
Lee?
My question, though, is, I mean, he promised he wasn't going to investigate Hillary Clinton. He's like, if I win, this is going to go away.
He did.
And I also feel that a lot of the American people are looking at this that don't support Donald Trump and saying this seems to be a tit for a tat. This seems to be, you're now saying because you're under investigation, you're going to throw it over here. How does he overcome that? Because he did make that promise.
That is a great argument. That's the argument being made by Senator Graham, a Republican from South Carolina, who's saying we have more important things in this country than vengeance against our former opponents.
Yeah. I mean, I was always taught rise above the petty. Is that not what?
Yeah, but if there was a crime committed,
correct. There's two arguments here. If there was a crime committed, it should be investigated, no matter who the potential defendant is. The other argument is, what would take Bob Mueller off the front pages more than, say, Rudy Giuliani as the independent counsel to prosecute Mrs. Clinton? Just throwing that out there.